Amid a blinding snowstorm, a loyal K9 suddenly froze, growling at a shadow lurking nearby. Inside an abandoned car, a pregnant woman trembled, whispering, "Don't let him find me." In that chilling moment, the fate of an entire family hung in the balance, forged by courage, love, and a fight for survival in the darkness. Subscribe now so you won't miss the next gripping and emotional episodes we bring to you. The storm had swallowed Pine Hollow whole. What had once been a sleepy mountain town, nestled in a valley of fir trees and winding roads, now looked like the set of a world forgotten. Snow came down in ruthless sheets, so thick that even the street lamps along the main drag seemed to dissolve into the white curtain. The air itself had teeth. Every gust tore down the ridge like an unrelenting beast, its claws scraping through alleys, clawing at window panes, and rattling the shutters of houses already buried beneath mounds of ice. Lucas Grant drove slowly through the storm, the wipers fighting a battle they were losing against the sleet. The cruiser's engine hummed low, a steady anchor against the howling chaos outside. His knuckles tightened around the steering wheel, not from fear, but from the instinct that had never left him, even after years away from the force. The storm didn't scare him. Silence did. Silence meant something could be lurking just beyond what the eye could see. In the back seat sat Ranger, his Belgian Malinois partner. Though the dog had been retired after a knee injury, Lucas refused to leave him behind. Tonight, more than ever, he needed the dog's instincts. Ranger sat tall ears, pricked amber eyes, scanning the world beyond the frosted windows. Every muscle in his body seemed tuned to a frequency Lucas couldn't hear. The radio crackled faintly with weather reports, words like whiteout conditions and roads. Impassable blurred together, but Lucas barely listened. His gaze cut through the windshield, the beam of the headlights slicing no more than a dozen feet ahead, before it was consumed by snow. He had grown used to Pine Hollow's winters. Born here, raised here, he'd once thought nothing could surprise him in these woods. But tonight felt different. The storm was more than a storm. It carried weight like a warning written into the wind. Then Ranger moved, a sudden shift of his body, ears snapping forward, nose pressing hard against the glass. A sound so faint, Lucas almost missed it, cut through the roar of the wind. A thump, a scrape, then silence. Lucas slowed the car, headlights glinting off the endless white, and leaned forward. That was when he saw it. A shape half buried in snow along the side of the timber road. Not an animal, not a fallen branch. A vehicle. Lucas's breath fogged against the glass as he pulled the cruiser onto the shoulder tires, crunching deep into the drifts. He killed the engine, the sudden silence striking harder than the cold. Ranger's shifted muscles, taut eyes never leaving the shape ahead. "Stay sharp," Lucas muttered, though the words were more for himself than the dog. The wind hit him full in the chest when he stepped outside, slicing through his jacket as though it were paper. Snow crunched up to his shins, biting cold, seeping through his boots with every step. He flicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting a shaky tunnel through the dark. The vehicle was an old sedan, paint dulled, and windows frosted over, half swallowed by a snowdrift. The engine was dead. No lights, no movement. The kind of scene that in Lucas's old life would have screamed danger. He approached cautiously, boots sinking deeper with each step. Ranger leapt from the back seat, landing gracefully in the snow, and trotted forward with his nose low to the ground. His hackles rose, a soft growl rumbling in his throat. Lucas's heart quickened. He circled the car light, sweeping across the windshield, where ice clung in jagged crystals. Then he saw her. A woman slumped against the driver's seat, her head tilted, breath fogging faintly against the glass. Her hands were pressed tight over her stomach, and even through the frost-blurred glass, Lucas could see the unmistakable swell beneath her coat. Pregnant. "Damn!" he whispered, rushing forward. He tugged at the door handle. Frozen solid. He slammed his shoulder into it once, twice, until it gave way, with a crack. Snow tumbled inside, cold air spilling over the woman's pale face. "Ma'am." Lucas's voice was sharp, commanding the way it had been in every emergency he'd ever run into. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. She stirred weakly, lips cracked, face ashen. For a moment he thought she might slip away completely. Then a whisper escaped, so fragile he barely caught it over the storm. "Don't! Let him find me!" Lucas's stomach knotted. He crouched closer, brushing snow from her shoulders, careful not to jar her too roughly. Her jacket was thin, soaked through, offering no warmth. He could feel her trembling, even through the layers. "Hey, you're safe now. I've got you," he said. Steady low, the kind of voice meant to anchor someone to consciousness. Her eyes opened halfway wide with a fear Lucas knew too well, the fear of being hunted. He'd seen it in war zones and safe houses, in the eyes of women clutching children in places no one should ever have to live. Ranger whined softly, circling the car nose, twitching ears, swiveling toward the tree line. Lucas's instincts screamed at him. Whoever him was, the woman believed he was close. Lucas slipped off his heavy jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, adjusting it over her swollen belly. She flinched at his touch, then slowly relaxed, the warmth seeping into her. "What's your name?" he asked gently, leaning closer so she could hear him through the storm. "Anna," she breathed. "Anna Miller." "Anna, I'm Lucas. This is Ranger. We're going to get you out of here." Her lips trembled as if she wanted to say more, but her strength was fading. Lucas checked her pulse, weak, but there. He glanced at Ranger, who was now staring into the woods, body rigid. Lucas followed the dog's gaze. Nothing but a wall of white and the skeletal shapes of trees swaying in the gale. But his gut told him the woman wasn't imagining things. He leaned close again, his breath warm against her chilled skin. "Anna, can you tell me who you're running from?" Her lips parted. For a heartbeat, no sound came. "Then he'll kill us, if he finds us." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Not tonight. Not on my watch." He slid an arm under her shoulders, careful not to jar her belly, and pulled her gently from the seat. She was lighter than he expected, fragile, yet her body shook with the effort of moving. Snowflakes clung to her lashes, melted against her bruised cheek. Ranger moved to Lucas's side, eyes alert, body tense. The dog pressed close as though offering his own warmth to the shivering woman. Lucas gritted his teeth against the cold and lifted Anna fully into his arms. The storm roared louder, as though determined to smother them. But Lucas held her tight, moving carefully toward the cruiser. Each step felt heavier, not from her weight, but from the knowledge that whoever had driven her into this hell might still be out there watching. Behind him, the forest moaned under the weight of the storm. Somewhere deep in the shadows, the crunch of snow echoed faintly, too deliberate to be the wind. Ranger growled low and dangerous. Lucas didn't turn. Not yet. First he had to get Anna safe. And in the white silence of Pine Hollow's storm, the battle lines had already been drawn. The cabin loomed ahead like a shadow carved from the storm itself. Weather-beaten wood groaned under the weight of snow clinging to the roof, its windows coated in frost, its door hanging slightly crooked as if it hadn't been opened in years. Lucas pushed through the drifts, his arms wrapped tightly around Anna, his breath sharp and ragged from the weight he carried, not just her body, but her fear, her unborn child, and the gnawing sense that something was already hunting them. Ranger bounded ahead, his paws breaking the crust of snow in clean, purposeful strides. The dog's ears flicked toward the darkened tree line, a growl simmering low in his chest. He paused at the door, nose pressed against the cracked tail, stiff, the kind of posture that told Lucas more than words ever could. They weren't alone. Inside, Lucas muttered under his breath, kicking the door with his boot. The wood splintered just enough to give swinging inward, with a whine of rusted hinges. The air inside was colder than he expected, sharp with dust and disuse, but at least the walls broke the wind. He carried Anna to the corner of the room and lowered her carefully onto a makeshift cot of moth-eaten blankets. She groaned faintly, her eyes flickering open, unfocused at first, before locking onto him. For a moment she flinched, fear surging up like a wave, then eased when she recognized his face. "You're okay," Lucas said softly, kneeling beside her. "You're safe here." Her lips parted dry and cracked voice rasping. "Safe? He'll find me." Lucas shook his head firmly, adjusting the jacket tighter around her shoulders. "Not tonight. Not with me here." Ranger patted close, resting his chin gently on the edge of the blanket. Anna's trembling hand reached out, hesitantly brushing against the dog's fur. The contact seemed to ground her, her chest rising in a steadier rhythm. "What's his name?" Lucas asked, his tone steady, but edged with steel. Her eyes shifted, haunted. Victor Kane." Lucas's jaw tensed. He knew the type. Men who believed fear was power, who saw women not as people, but as possessions. The kind of predator that didn't stop until someone forced them to. Her voice cracked as she continued, each word pulled from her like a shard of glass. He doesn't let you go. Not ever." Images flickered in her eyes, and though her words faltered, Lucas could see the flashback forming behind her gaze. Cold concrete walls, metal doors that clanged shut, locking out the light. A row of women, their faces pale and hollow, clutching children too young to understand why they weren't allowed to cry. Chains rattling, the smell of mildew and gasoline. And in the center, Victor Kane, tall, broad, with eyes like polished steel, smiling as though the world had been built to obey him. He kept the keys clipped to his belt, dangling them like a trophy, a constant reminder of who held control. "He said I'd never make it out," Anna whispered, eyes glassy. "That if I tried, he'd make sure no one ever found me. No one ever believed me." Lucas leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You got out. You're here, and I believe you." Tears welled in her eyes, freezing against the corners before they could fall. She shook her head weakly. "He'll kill the baby?" No, Lucas said, steady, unyielding. "Not while I'm breathing." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady sound of Ranger's breathing and the faint howl of the storm pressing against the walls. Then Ranger's ears shot up. He stiffened, a low growl vibrating through his chest. Lucas's head snapped toward the door. The sound was faint but unmistakable. The crunch of snow, deliberate, heavy, too rhythmic to be the wind. Someone was moving out there. He reached instinctively for the sidearm, holstered beneath his coat fingers, brushing cold steel. Slowly, he rose, crossing to the window. Frost obscured the view, but beneath the ice, the outline of the world shimmered. He wiped a patch with his sleeve, peering out. At first, nothing. Just the swirling chaos of snow trees bent under the weight of ice shadows shifting with the wind. But then he saw it. A set of footprints leading from the tree line, fresh, sharp, sinking deep into the powder. Not one pair, two. Maybe three. Lucas's pulse quickened. He turned back to Anna, who watched him with wide, terrified eyes. "Stay down. Don't make a sound." She clutched her belly, nodding frantically, lips trembling. Ranger shifted closer to the door posture, rigid ears pointed forward like arrows. The growl deepened, a warning that Lucas had learned never to ignore. He flicked off the flashlight, plunging the cabin into a dim gloom lit only by slivers of moonlight fighting through the storm. Every creak of the old wood seemed louder, every breath heavier. Anna's whisper broke the silence. He doesn't work alone." Lucas didn't answer, but the confirmation twisted like a knife in his gut. Victor Kane wasn't a man who chased prey in the snow without backup. This was calculated, coordinated. He leaned against this wall near the door, every muscle coiled, listening. The storm filled the silence with its roar, but beneath it, yes, the faint crunch again. Closer this time, deliberate. Ranger let out a short, sharp bark, cutting through the night like a crack of thunder. Lucas knelt quickly beside Anna. "Listen to me. If anything happens, you don't run into the woods. You stay behind me and you stay low. Understand?" Her eyes were wide, glistening with fear, but she nodded. "He'll never stop," she whispered. "Then we don't give him the chance." She closed her eyes, clutching the blanket tighter. Lucas pressed a hand lightly to her shoulder, steadying her. He had been in war zones, ambushes, alleys where shadows carried knives. But never before had he felt the stakes press so heavily against his chest. This wasn't just survival, it was a promise. Outside, the storm shifted the wind, carrying with it something darker than snow. And in the silence that followed, Lucas knew without doubt Victor Kane was near. Ben Parker always thought the world looked different in the middle of a storm. It wasn't just the way snow buried the streets, or how the wind drowned out every sound except its own. It was the stillness, the way familiar things transformed into shapes and shadows that made you question if you really knew them at all. Tonight, that stillness pressed against the windows of his grandmother's house, like a living thing, heavy and watchful. He sat cross-legged on the living room floor, a battered notebook balanced on his knees. The pages were filled with sketches, trees bending in the wind. The old water tower, the face of a stray dog he'd once fed behind the grocery store. Drawing was the only way Ben knew how to make sense of the world. When the world felt too big, too loud, or too broken, a pencil gave him a way to trap it, to hold it still long enough to understand it. The pencil moved across the page, now shaping the outline of the snow piling against the porch steps. His grandmother's voice floated in from the kitchen. Ben, she called the rhythm of her knitting needles clacking softly. "Don't sit so close to the window. You'll catch a chill." "I'm fine, Grandma," he said, not looking up. Joan Parker had raised him since he was 6, after the accident that had stolen both his parents in one cruel night. She was careful not to smother him, but her worry was never far away. Tonight it edged every word. The storm was bad. The kind of storm that kept even the bravest men inside. Ben pressed harder with his pencil shading in the shadows along the road when something broke the pattern of white outside the window. Movement, slow, deliberate. His breath caught. A vehicle crawled through the drifts, its engine muffled under the howl of the wind. The headlights flickered, one bright one, dead, casting uneven shadows against the snow. The truck was old, its paint a dull steel gray, and as it passed under the dim street lamp, Ben saw it clearly, a logo painted on the door. A wrench crossed with a knife, crude and sharp, the paint scratched but visible. Ben's pencil froze mid-stroke. He didn't recognize the truck, but something about it didn't feel right. Vehicles didn't come down this road during storms like this. And the way it moved, slow, prowling, as though looking for something instead of going somewhere, set his stomach twisting. The truck paused near the corner of the street. Its lone working headlight swept across the snow like an eye. Then as quickly as it had come, it rolled on, vanishing into the white. Ben's heart thudded. He flipped to a blank page and started to sketch, his fingers moving faster than he could think. The outline of the truck, the broken headlight, the crooked logo, the blade crossing the wrench. Every detail burned into his mind, urgent, as though some invisible voice whispered that remembering this mattered. He didn't notice Joan until she stepped quietly behind him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" she asked. Ben tilted the notebook just enough for her to see. Her knitting needle stilled in her other hand. "A truck," she murmured. Her brows pinched. "Out here tonight?" Ben nodded, the pencil still scratching. It had a broken headlight and a sign on the door. I think it was looking for something." Joan's expression tightened, the lines around her eyes deepening. She glanced toward the window, though the street outside was already swallowed in white again. "It's probably nothing," she said gently. "Storm like this, you can imagine all kinds of things." But her voice carried something else, hesitation, fear she didn't want him to hear. Ben looked up, his eyes sharp, the kind of eyes that noticed more than any child should. "It wasn't nothing. I know what I saw." She sighed, brushing a strand of graying hair from her face. "You have to promise me, Ben. Don't go outside tonight. Not for anything. This storm is too dangerous." He nodded, though the answer came slower than she wanted. His gaze drifted back to the notebook, to the drawing of the truck, to the feeling gnawing in his chest that the storm wasn't the only danger out there. For the next few minutes, Joan returned to her chair, the steady click of needles resuming, though not as smooth as before. She kept glancing at the window, then back at her grandson, the tension in her shoulders never easing. Ben shaded the broken headlight darker, added the faint streaks of snow across the hood. The more he drew, the more he realized how precise his memory was. He hadn't just seen the truck, he'd memorized it. When the drawing was done, he stared at it for a long moment, then flipped the notebook shut and hugged it to his chest. "Grandma," he said quietly. "Yes, dear. If something bad was happening, would you want to know?" Joan looked at him, her expression softening. "Of course I would. Why do you ask?" Ben hesitated. He wasn't sure how to explain it. That he felt in his bones the truck wasn't just passing through. That the logo and the way the headlight flickered made his skin crawl. That storms like this hid more than snow. Instead, he said, "I just think sometimes people don't see things, even when they're right in front of them." Joan's eyes lingered on him for a moment longer before she leaned down and kissed the top of his head. "You have a good heart, Ben, and sharp eyes. But for tonight, let the grown-ups worry about what's out there." Ben nodded again, though he didn't mean it. Later, when Joan had gone upstairs to check the extra blankets, Ben sat alone in the glow of the fireplace. The storm still howled against the walls, but in the quiet between gusts, he thought he heard something else. A sound. Distant. A door slamming. A faint bark carried on the wind. He moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. Nothing. Just the endless snow. But he clutched the notebook tighter, staring at the drawing. He didn't know it yet. But that sketch, those careful lines, the broken headlight, the twisted logo would become more than a drawing. It would become a lifeline. And in that moment, as the storm raged and shadows crept closer, Ben Parker felt a shiver race down his spine. Not from the cold, but from the certainty that something in Pine Hollow was terribly, terribly wrong. The radio spat static, a harsh grating sound that seemed to mock Lucas with every failed attempt. He adjusted the dial again, fingers stiff from the cold, his jaw tightening. Nothing but white noise. The storm had swallowed every frequency, every chance of reaching the outside world. Lucas lowered the receiver slowly, the weight of silence pressing harder than the storm itself. He glanced toward Anna. She was pale beads of sweat glistening on her forehead, despite the frigid air, her hands clutching the curve of her belly. The look in her eyes made his chest tighten, not just fear, but pain. The kind that didn't wait. "Lucas," her voice broke soft and trembling. "Something's wrong." He was beside her, in a heartbeat, crouching low, his hand brushing the damp strands of hair from her face. "Tell me," he said, calm but firm, anchoring her. Anchoring. Her lips quivered. It hurts. Lower. Sharp. I think." She gasped, clutching tighter at her stomach. Lucas felt his pulse surge. "Not here. Not now." "You're having contractions," he said, keeping his voice steady, though the storm inside him roared just as fiercely as the one outside. "Early. But we can handle this. You hear me? We'll get through it." Her eyes searched his, desperate for something to hold on to. "You're not alone anymore," he added, his tone iron and gentle all at once. "I promise." A low, urgent growl cut through the air. Lucas's head snapped toward the door. Ranger stood rigid, nose lifted, body trembling with focus. His hackles bristled, the sound vibrating deep in his chest. He wasn't warning at random. He had caught something. Lucas rose slowly, moving to the frost-coated window. He wiped a patch clean with his sleeve, his breath fogging the glass as he leaned closer. At first, nothing but the endless swirl of snow. Then movement. A shadow. Human. It flashed across the tree line there and gone in a heartbeat like a phantom slipping between worlds. Too quick to identify, too deliberate to be the storm playing tricks. Lucas's gut clenched. He stepped back from the window, his hand instinctively brushing the grip of his pistol. Anna's voice, strained, reached him. "Did you see?" "Stay calm," Lucas said, forcing a steady tone. He turned to Ranger. "Find." The dog's ears flicked, his body lowering as he padded to the far corner of the room. He sniffed hard at the base of the wall, then turned, nose darting toward the rear door. A sharp whine, then another growl. Lucas's mind raced. Whoever was out there knew where they were. The storm had hidden their arrival, but it wouldn't keep them hidden forever. He crouched beside Anna again. "Listen to me. I need to make sure we've got supplies. Ranger and I are stepping out just for a minute. You lock this door behind us. Don't open it unless it's me." Her fingers clutched his sleeve, her grip weak but desperate. "Don't leave me." Lucas covered her hand with his own. "I'll be right back. You're not alone anymore. Remember?" She hesitated, then gave the smallest nod, tears clinging to the corners of her eyes. Lucas stood motioning to Ranger. The dog moved like a shadow. Every muscle alert, every step measured. They slipped into the howling night, the wind slamming against them like a wall. The storm bit hard, tearing at Lucas's jacket, but he pushed forward, Ranger, leading with his nose low to the ground. The dog weaved through the snow ears, flicking body tense. Then he stopped pawing at the side of a collapsed shed a few yards away. Lucas pulled his flashlight from his belt, angling the beam through the cracks. The interior was dim dust, swirling with every draft. Then the light hit a crate. He forced the door open, the wood creaking loud against the storm, and stepped inside. The air smelled of mildew and rust, but his eyes locked on what mattered, an old first aid kit, weathered but intact, sitting atop a crate. He grabbed it, flipping it open. Gauze, antiseptic, scissors, painkillers, primitive but more than he had minutes ago. Ranger gave a sharp bark, his body spinning toward the far window. Lucas's beam followed, sweeping across the snow outside. Nothing, just white, then faintly a shape again. The same shadow. Watching. Lucas's grip tightened on the kit. He couldn't chase. Not yet. Anna needed him more. "Come on," he muttered. And they returned to the cabin, Ranger checking every drift along the way, his growl never fully fading. Inside, Anna had pushed herself upright, sweat streaking her temples. She looked up at him, fear in her eyes, relief softening her features when she saw the kit in his hands. Lucas set it beside her, crouching low. "Found something. It'll help." Her breathing was ragged, her face pale, but when his hand brushed hers, she held on. "You're not alone anymore," he repeated softer this time, letting the words settle into the cracks fear had carved in her. She closed her eyes, gripping tighter. Outside, the storm howled. And through the frost-blurred window, the shadow lingered, waiting. The forest held its breath. Snow clung to the pines, like thick bandages, muffling every sound, except the slow, deliberate crunch of boots pressing into ice. 3 figures moved through the tree line, their shapes cutting shadows against the pale glow of the storm-washed night. At the front, Victor Kane walked with the calm precision of a man who believed the world belonged to him. His coat, long and black, swayed with each step, the hem damp from the drifts. In his gloved hand, he held a pair of binoculars, the lenses catching faint slivers of moonlight. He lifted them slowly, pressing them against his eyes. Through the magnified lens, the cabin came into view. Its roof sagged under the weight of snow smoke curling faintly from the crooked chimney. The windows glowed dim with the fragile warmth of a lantern. Victor's lips curved into a cold smile. "She's here," he murmured. Behind him, the 2 men who flanked his path exchanged a quick glance. Both were broad, their movements, less disciplined, but no less dangerous. One carried a crowbar slung across his shoulder, the other cradled a shotgun, low and ready. "You sure the man with the crowbar?" asked, his breath curling in the freezing air. Victor lowered the binoculars slowly, his gaze sharp as steel. "I don't need to be sure. I can feel it. She's like a candle in the dark. You don't miss something like that." He turned, scanning the snow for prints. The storm had nearly erased them, but not completely. Faint indentations, small but fresh, trailed toward the cabin. He crouched, brushing a gloved hand across the icy impression. "She's close to breaking," Victor muttered, more to himself than the others. "Running always makes them weaker. Fear does the rest." He straightened, tucking the binoculars into his coat. His voice dropped low, almost like a prayer. Tonight, it ends. Back inside the cabin, Ranger's growl rumbled deep, low, and primal. The sound vibrated through the floorboards, cutting into the silence, with a warning Lucas didn't need translated. He moved to the window, crouching slightly, one hand resting on the butt of his pistol. "What is it, boy?" His voice was low, steady, though every nerve in his body felt stretched thin. Ranger didn't move his gaze. His amber eyes fixed hard on the tree line, his muscles coiled like a spring. His ears flicked forward, then flattened again, his body trembling with contained energy. Lucas's gut tightened. He didn't need to see them to know. They were here. Behind him, Anna stirred. Her breath came in short, uneven gasps. She clutched her belly, her face pale and damp with sweat. "What is it?" she whispered. Her voice cracked with both fear and pain. Lucas glanced back, his jaw set. Trouble. Her eyes widened, glistening. "It's him. Isn't it?" Lucas didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was written in his face, in the way his hand hovered just above his weapon, in the sound of Ranger's growl deepening with every second. Tears welled in Anna's eyes, spilling before she could stop them. Her voice broke a trembling whisper. "If he catches me, if he takes me back, the baby won't live." Lucas crossed to her, quickly crouching low, his hand pressing gently but firmly against her trembling fingers. He met her gaze, his voice steady, direct, unyielding. "Listen to me. That's not going to happen. Do you understand? Not while I'm here, not while Ranger's here. You're not going back." Her lips quivered. "He doesn't stop. Then we stop him." Lucas's eyes burned with quiet fire, his words sharp as steel. For a long moment, Anna just stared at him, as if weighing the impossible hope he offered against the crushing certainty of fear. Then slowly she nodded. Lucas brushed a strand of damp hair from her forehead, the touch gentle, almost reverent. "Breathe with me," he whispered. "In, out. That's it." Ranger let out a sudden sharp bark, jerking both their heads toward the window. Lucas moved fast, crouching low against the frame. Through a narrow slit in the frost, he saw it. A figure, just for an instant, but enough. The glint of metal in a gloved hand. The rigid posture of a man trained in the art of hunting. "Victor." Lucas's breath slowed his heartbeat, a steady thunder in his ears. He dropped low, motioning for Anna to stay down. She clutched his sleeve, whispering, "Don't let him in." "I won't," Lucas said. His tone wasn't soft. It was a vow. He shifted closer to the window, pistol drawn now, the weight of it familiar and cold. Ranger pressed to his side, his body trembling with focus. Teeth bared just enough to show the flash of white in the dim light. Outside, Victor's boots crunched through the snow, deliberate and unhurried. He stopped just short of the clearing, his eyes scanning the cabin, calculating. His men spread out slightly, one angling toward the left, the other toward the right, like wolves circling prey. Victor raised the binoculars again, lifting them slow, savoring the moment. Through the lens, he saw a flicker of movement inside. The faint shadow of a man crouched near the window. A woman's silhouette behind him. Victor's smile was thin, cold, merciless. He lowered the glass. "She's here," he repeated, this time louder, his voice carrying through the trees. The sound cut through the storm, reaching the cabin like a blade. Anna gasped, her whole body trembling. Lucas pressed a finger gently to his lips, motioning for silence. He leaned close enough for his whisper to brush against her ear. "He doesn't get in. Not tonight." Her tears slid hot against her frozen cheeks, her hand tightening on his, like it was the only anchor left in the world. Outside, Victor's shadow lingered. He tipped his head slightly, as if savoring the fear he knew was spreading inside those walls. And then softly he spoke, his words low but sharp enough to carry. "You can't hide forever, Anna." Lucas's grip on his pistol tightened. Ranger's growl deepened into a sound that shook the air itself. The storm howled. The cabin trembled, and in that frozen stretch of night, the line between predator and protector drew sharp and unbreakable. Lucas shifted closer to the window, whispering only for Anna to hear. "This ends here." The cabin had always felt small, but now its walls seemed to shrink with every passing second, as though the storm itself were pressing them inward. Lucas moved quickly, quietly, his movements sharpened by years of training. He grabbed a wooden table from the corner, dragging it with controlled force toward the front door. The legs scraped softly against the floorboards, the sound nearly drowned out by the wind, rattling the shutters. He wedged the table at an angle, bracing it against the doorframe. Next came a chair, its legs splintering slightly as he forced it tight into place. It wasn't much, but every second bought mattered. Ranger padded alongside him, his nails clicking softly against the wooden floor. He positioned himself low at the door chest, pressed to the floorboards, ears standing high, every muscle alert. His amber eyes burned like coals in the dim light. Lucas crouched beside the dog for a moment, running a steady hand over his back. "We hold here, partner?" He whispered, his tone low and firm. Ranger's ears twitched, a faint huff of breath escaping his muzzle. Behind them, Anna sat propped against a pile of blankets, her face pale and glistening with sweat. She had pulled Lucas's jacket tighter around her shoulders, her trembling hands resting protectively on her belly. Her breathing was uneven, shallow. Her lips pressed together to stifle the whimpers of pain. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can still see it. That night." He turned, his eyes softening for a fraction of a second. "You don't have to." "I do," she cut him off, her gaze fixed somewhere far beyond the walls of the cabin. "If I don't say it out loud, it'll own me forever." Lucas stayed silent, giving her the space to continue, her eyes unfocused as though replaying every detail. It was raining. Not like the storm, now louder. Sheets of it. I thought the noise would cover me. She swallowed hard, her voice catching. I waited until he fell asleep. His gun was on the table right there next to the bottle he'd emptied. I remember staring at it, wondering if I could. Her breath shook. She pressed a trembling hand to her belly, her eyes wet. But I couldn't risk it. Not with him so close. So I ran. I didn't even take shoes. Just the jacket I found on the floor. I ran through the mud, the trees tearing at my arms, the ground swallowing me whole. And the whole time I could hear him. Not chasing yet, just laughing, like he knew I couldn't get far. Her voice broke, a single tear slipping down her cheek. And I haven't stopped running since. Lucas felt his chest tighten. He wanted to tell her she was safe now. He wanted to swear it. But a sound from outside froze the words on his tongue. Crunch, a boot pressing deep into the snow. Lucas's head snapped toward the window. He lowered himself slowly, signaling Anna with a finger pressed to his lips. Imlang, he whispered the command, crisp and low, his breath a cloud in the cold air. He's testing us. Anna's eyes widened. She held her breath, clutching the blanket tighter. Ranger's body went rigid, the growl in his throat so deep it was more felt than heard. Another crunch. Closer. Lucas gripped the pistol tighter, every instinct honed from his years in uniform, blazing alive inside him. He edged toward the window, moving low and controlled. His heart pounded steady, each beat, measured deliberate like a drum he'd marched to too many times before. Outside, the storm swirled thick, but through the streaks of snow clinging to the glass, a shadow moved. Victor. His figure passed slowly across the window just feet away. His coat brushed the wood siding with a faint whisper, his face turning just enough for Lucas to catch the glint of his eyes in the dim lantern light. Cold, calculated, patient. Lucas froze, breath shallow. He didn't raise the gun. Not yet. The glass was thin. A bullet through it would give away everything. Victor paused, head tilting slightly as if listening. Lucas's pulse thundered in his ears. He dared not move, not even to glance at Anna, though he felt her terror like a heat behind him. Ranger's body trembled, the growl in his chest, rising, restrained only by the steady hand Lucas pressed against his flank. Victor leaned closer to the glass, his breath fogging faintly against it. Then just as suddenly, he moved on his shadow, slipping toward the other side of the cabin. Lucas exhaled slowly, though the pressure in his chest didn't ease. He turned just enough to whisper, "He's probing." Looking for weakness. Anna's eyes glistened, her body trembling as though her fear alone could shake the walls. She whispered back her words, barely audible. "He won't stop." Lucas crouched beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Then we don't give him a way in." Outside, more footsteps circled, muffled but deliberate. The sound of metal clicking, reloading, or maybe checking a weapon. Lucas's jaw tightened. His instincts screamed that the standoff had just begun. The snow fell harder, a relentless curtain that blurred the town into shades of gray. Streetlights burned like distant candles, their halos dimmed by the storm. Ben Parker pulled his coat tighter around his small frame. His sketchbook pressed firmly under one arm. His breath puffed white clouds into the bitter air as he trudged through knee-deep drifts, each step heavier than the last. He wasn't supposed to be out. His grandmother had warned him, her voice trembling with worry. "The storm's too dangerous, Ben. Stay inside." But he couldn't. Not after what he saw. The image of the truck haunted him. The busted headlight, the strange logo etched on the door like crossed blades. He could still hear the crunch of its tires outside his window. Could still feel the way his stomach sank when the sirens wailed moments later. Something about it had been wrong. And now, with the storm hiding the world, he knew someone was in danger. So he ran. The snow clawed at his legs, biting his skin through his soaked jeans. Twice he felt his knees slamming into the ice, his palms burning raw from catching himself. He gritted his teeth and pushed up, ignoring the sting. He had to make it. He had to. In his pocket he carried the only proof he had: a folded page torn from his sketchbook. On it, drawn with the precision only a boy who noticed too much could manage, was the logo, the wrench and blade, crossed sharp, shaded dark, the busted headlight captured in jagged pencil lines. He clutched it like a talisman, as though it could carry him through the storm. Ahead, the faint glow of the Pine Hollow police station cut through the swirling white. Relief surged in his chest, but his legs trembled, threatening to give way again. He forced them forward one step, then another, until at last he stumbled against the door and shoved it open. The warmth inside hit him like a wave, the sudden rush of heated air stealing his breath. He doubled over, gasping snow dripping from his hair onto the tiled floor. 2 officers looked up sharply from behind the counter. "Kid," one of them said, his brows knitting. "What the hell are you doing out in this?" Ben straightened, panting hard. His cheeks flushed red. I saw it," he stammered, his voice shaking with cold and urgency. "Saw what?" "The truck." His words spilled out too fast, tumbling over each other. "The one with the broken light." "It was near my house. I drew it." The officers exchanged a quick glance. One, a heavy-set man with thinning hair, stepped closer. "Slow down, son." "A truck. You sure you're not just imagining things? This storm." "I'm not imagining it." Ben snapped louder than he meant to. He fumbled with his pocket, pulling out the folded sketch and thrusting it forward with trembling hands. "Here, look." The officer unfolded the paper slowly. His eyes widened despite himself. The drawing was sharp, detailed, too detailed for a child to have invented. The broken headlight, the exact angle of the logo, even the dent on the fender. The other officer leaned in, his jaw tightening. This looks familiar." Ben's chest heaved as he forced the words out. "He's out there. I know it. Someone's in trouble. Please, you have to listen." For a long moment the room was silent, except for the hum of the old heater and the muffled roar of the storm outside. Finally, the older officer nodded, sliding the sketch to his partner. "Get this over to dispatch. Now." The second officer hesitated only a second before picking up the radio. His voice was clipped professional, but beneath it, urgency bled through. "Base, we've got a possible match on a vehicle. Send this through the emergency channel." Ben sagged slightly, relief warring with exhaustion. His legs shook so hard, he thought they might give way. The older officer crouched down, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "You did good, kid. Real good. What's your name?" "Ben," he whispered. "Well, Ben, you might have just saved someone's life tonight." But even as the words settled, doubt flickered in the man's eyes. He glanced toward the radio, his expression tense. "Let's hope we're not too late." Out on the emergency frequency, a burst of static cracked through Lucas Grant's receiver. He stiffened instantly, pulling the small device close. "Copy, possible sighting confirmed." The voice broke through the interference. "Sketch from a local. Vehicle silver truck headlight, busted logo, crossblade. Matches prior suspect report." Lucas's grip tightened on the radio, his pulse surging. He shot a glance at Ranger, who was still crouched low near the door ears, flicking with every sound outside. Then to Anna, who looked up with wide, terrified eyes, clutching her belly tighter. The voice continued sharper now. "Lucas, this is Pine Hollow Dispatch. Be advised, suspect may be in your vicinity. Repeat, Victor Kane may be closing in." The room fell silent, except for the faint hiss of the storm. Lucas lowered the radio slowly, his expression carved from steel. He crouched beside Anna, his voice low but firm. "Help's coming, but we hold until then." Her eyes shimmered with fear and disbelief. How do you know?" He glanced toward the door, the corners of his mouth tightening. "Because a kid just risked his life in this storm to make sure we weren't alone." Ranger gave a low bark as if confirming the words. Anna's tears spilled silent this time. For the first time since the night began, she let herself believe just for a moment that maybe there was a way out. Outside in the trees, Victor paused mid-stride, his head tilting. He had heard the faint crackle of radio static from within the cabin. His lips curled into a smile that never reached his eyes. So he murmured, breath frosting in the cold they know. His grip tightened on the crowbar he carried, and he signaled his men forward through the snow. The hunt was far from over. The first sound was wood splintering. The cabin door shuddered under the force of a heavy kick, the makeshift barricade creaking as nails threatened to tear free from the frame. Lucas spun, pistol raised, his body already moving before his mind caught up. Ranger was at the door, fur bristling, a growl tearing through his chest that seemed to rattle the floorboards. "Stay down," Lucas barked over his shoulder to Anna, his voice sharp, commanding, leaving no room for hesitation. The second blow hit harder, the legs of the table groaning under the pressure. Snow whirled in through the cracks as the cold night air forced its way inside. A third slam sent the chair skidding sideways, and with a final deafening crack, the door burst inward. Victor Kane stepped through, his silhouette backlit by the ghostly glow of the storm. His eyes locked immediately on the woman huddled behind Lucas. He smiled, a slow, cruel curve that chilled the air more than the snow ever could. "Hello, Anna?" He drawled, his voice thick with venomous calm. "Did you really think you could run from me?" "Not another step!" Lucas shouted, his pistol snapping up the muzzle trained steady at Victor's chest. Behind Victor, two men stormed in flashlights, cutting jagged beams through the swirling snow, their boots thudding against the wooden floor. One carried a shotgun, the other a jagged hunting knife glinting in the light. For a heartbeat, the cabin was a tableau of breathless silence. Predator and protector prey, trembling in the shadows, and a loyal German shepherd braced to spring. Then the storm inside the walls erupted. Lucas fired a warning shot into the beam above the doorway, the explosion deafening in the small space. Wood-splintered dust rained down. The intruders flinched, ducking instinctively. It was all the opening ranger needed. The German shepherd launched forward with a snarl, a streak of black and silver fur colliding with the man holding the knife. The impact sent him crashing into the wall, the blade clattering to the floor. Ranger's jaws clamped down on the man's arm, teeth sinking deep, a cry ripping from the intruder's throat. The shotgun roared. Lucas twisted sideways, the blast shredding a lamp in an eruption of sparks and flame. He dove behind the overturned table, returning fire, his bullets shattering the edge of the doorframe, forcing the gunman to duck. "Anna down." Lucas shouted again, his voice fierce, cutting through the chaos. But Anna's scream wasn't from fear this time. Her hands clutched her belly, her body folding as pain ripped through her. The sound of it cut Lucas deeper than any gunfire. "Lucas," she cried, her voice ragged, desperate. "It's happening." Lucas's blood ran cold. "Not now. God, not now." "Hold on," he shouted, his eyes darting from her to the chaos unfolding around them. Victor stood motionless, watching it all, with a predator's patience, his eyes glinting in the flicker of the broken lamp. He didn't flinch when the bullets flew. He didn't blink when the knife man screamed. He simply stepped forward, his voice calm, almost soothing. "She's mine," he said. Lucas fired again, the shot grazing the shotgun wielder's shoulder, sending him sprawling into the corner with a curse. "Not tonight." Lucas growled, his voice low, unyielding. The man trapped under a ranger thrashed his boots slamming against the dog's ribs. Ranger yelped in pain, but didn't let go. His teeth locked with unrelenting fury. Blood stained the man's sleeve dark as he struggled, his flashlight skittering across the floor. Lucas's chest heaved. He was outnumbered, boxed in, with Anna's cries cutting through the chaos like a siren. But his instincts, honed through years of battle, screamed one thing: you hold. You don't break. He dropped low, rolling behind the table just as Victor's crowbar came swinging. The metal smashed against the wood with a brutal crack, splinters flying inches from Lucas's face. Lucas fired upward, the bullet ripping through Victor's coat sleeve. Victor snarled, retreating half a step, but his eyes never wavered from Anna. Behind them, Anna clutched the blankets, her face pale and slick with sweat. "Lucas, please." Her voice trembled, every contraction stealing her breath. "I've got you," he yelled, the promise more desperate than he'd admit. The shotgun wielder reappeared, gun raised. Lucas swung fast, aiming low, squeezing the trigger. The bullet caught the man in the thigh. He screamed, collapsing, his weapon clattering uselessly to the floor. Ranger blood streaking his fur released the man. He'd pinned spinning with a snarl toward the downed gunman. His ears flattened, his teeth bared his body, shielding Anna without hesitation. Victor's face twisted, fury finally breaking through his calm mask. "You think you can stop me with a washed-up cop and a crippled mutt?" His words dripped contempt. Lucas stood chest heaving, his pistol leveled directly at Victor's heart. "Try me." The two men locked eyes, the storm outside howling, as if echoing their silent war. Victor lunged, crowbar swinging again. Lucas met him head-on, their bodies colliding in the narrow cabin. The impact rattled the walls, the pistol flying from Lucas's hand as the crowbar slammed into his shoulder. Pain flared white-hot, but Lucas didn't falter. He slammed his fist into Victor's jaw, the crack of bone and flesh echoing over Anna's cries. Anna screamed again, clutching her belly as another wave of pain tore through her. Tears streaked down her face. Lucas shoved Victor back, staggering, his vision swimming. Ranger lunged, teeth flashing, driving the knife man away from Anna's side as he tried to crawl closer. The dog's growl turned into a furious bark, each snap of his jaws buying seconds of precious time. Victor wiped the blood from his lip, his grin savage. "You can't win, Grant. You can't fight me and save her at the same time." Lucas's chest heaved, his eyes burning. "Watch me." Outside, through the chaos of snow and shadow, faint lights flickered in the distance, the telltale beams of approaching vehicles. "Back up." But too far, too slow. Inside every second was survival. Victor came again, the crowbar arcing high. Lucas ducked, grabbing the weapon mid-swing, twisting hard. The two men struggled, the metal between them, a lifeline and a weapon all at once. Victor's strength was brutal, but Lucas fought with something deeper. Something carved into his bones by every life he hadn't saved, every name that still haunted him. Ranger barked, snapping Victor's attention for just a fraction of a second. It was all Lucas needed. He wrenched the crowbar free, driving the butt into Victor's ribs with a bone-jarring crack. Victor staggered, rage and pain flashing across his face. But his eyes flicked back to Anna, always back to Anna. Anna screamed again, her body folding as the contraction tore through her. Lucas, she sobbed, her voice breaking raw and desperate. Lucas dropped the crowbar, rushing to her side, his hand clasping hers tight. I'm here. Look at me, Anna. Stay with me. Her eyes locked on his, wide and terrified. I can't. Yes, you can. His voice was fierce, his hands steady even as the storm and the battle raged around them. Victor's shadow loomed behind them, fury boiling over. But Ranger was faster. The dog launched with everything he had left, slamming into Victor's side. They crashed against the wall, Victor's crowbar flying from his grip as Ranger's teeth tore into his coat. Victor roared, his fist slamming against the dog's ribs. Ranger yelped, pain ripping through him, but he didn't let go. He refused. Lucas turned his free hand, groping for his pistol. His fingers closed around it just as Victor shoved Ranger back, blood streaking his fur. Lucas raised the gun, his voice like thunder. Move, Ranger! The shepherd obeyed, dropping low at the last second. Lucas fired. The bullet whizzed past Victor's ear, burying into the wooden frame inches from his head. A warning shot. A promise. Victor froze his chest, heaving, his face twisted in rage. You're done, Lucas growled. Anna's cries filled the cabin, sharp, raw, unstoppable. Ranger, bloodied but unbowed, pressed himself protectively at her side, his eyes blazing at anyone who dared step closer. The storm howled louder, as though the night itself knew the battle was far from over. The cabin shuddered again. The storm outside howling like a beast, clawing at the walls. Lucas's breath came fast, ragged, his arm burning where Victor's crowbar had struck. His pistol felt heavy in his grip, but his focus was on the woman collapsing beside him. Anna's face was pale, streaked with sweat despite the bitter cold. She clutched her belly with both hands, her body shaking as another contraction seized her. Her lips parted, a strangled cry escaping as she slumped toward him. Lucas, her voice cracked, her eyes wide with terror. It's coming. I can't. Yes, you can. He snapped, his tone sharp but filled with desperate resolve. He knelt beside her, steadying her against the cabin wall. His hand found hers, fingers tightening, anchoring her in the chaos. You hear me? You're stronger than this storm. Stronger than him. The baby needs you. I need you to fight. A sudden crack split the air. Wood splintered as a bullet tore through the cabin door, missing Anna's head by inches. Shards flew across the floor, stinging Lucas's cheek. Down he roared, pulling Anna close, shielding her with his own body. Ranger was already moving. The shepherd erupted from the shadows with a guttural snarl, his eyes blazing amber in the dim light. He lunged at the man who had fired through the doorway, a burly figure with a rifle pressed to his shoulder. The two collided violently, the intruder's scream muffled by the dog's growl as teeth sank deep into his arm. The rifle clattered to the ground. The man staggered back, swinging wildly, but Ranger held firm, shaking his head with primal force. Blood spattered across the snow, drifting through the doorway, a violent splash of red against white. Ranger Lucas shouted, his voice both command and plea. But the shepherd needed no order. He was a wall of fury and loyalty, holding the man at bay with unbreakable resolve. Anna whimpered, her body jerking with another contraction. Lucas dropped beside her again, gripping her hand. Her nails dug into his skin as she cried out, her face twisting in agony. Breathe with me, Lucas urged, his voice softer now, but no less firm. In, out. You've got this, Anna. Her chest heaved, her breath shallow, desperate. I can't. It hurts. You can. He whispered fiercely, pressing his forehead to hers for a split second. You've already survived him. You'll survive this too. Her eyes glistened, locking onto his, and for a heartbeat, the chaos fell away. It was just them, the fear, the pain, the impossible task ahead. Another gunshot ripped through the night, this one slamming into the wall behind them. Dust rained from the ceiling, the air sharp with the scent of gunpowder. Lucas whipped around, pistol raised, and fired back through the doorway. The flash lit the room, stark and violent, illuminating Victor's silhouette just beyond the threshold. Victor's laugh drifted in with the cold, low, and merciless. You can't hold out forever, Grant. She's mine. And when she breaks, so will you. Lucas's teeth clenched, fury coiling in his gut. Over my dead body. Victor stepped back into the storm's shadows, signaling his remaining man forward. The intruder hesitated, glancing at his partner still pinned under Ranger's relentless jaws. The shepherd, though bleeding from a graze along his flank, refused to let go. His growls reverberated through the floorboards, a sound as primal as the wind itself. Lucas? Anna gasped, clutching tighter at his hand. It's happening now. He turned back instantly, the world narrowing to her face, contorted in pain, her breaths sharp and frantic. You stay with me, he said, steady and low, though his heart thundered in his chest. Eyes on me, Anna. Don't look at them. Don't think about them. Just breathe. Her cries tore through the cabin as another wave seized her. Lucas pulled off his jacket, spreading it beneath her against the cold floor. His hands shook not from fear, but from the sheer weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had delivered fallen comrades from gunfire, carried wounded children from car wrecks, but never this. Never a child born in the teeth of a storm, while death clawed at the door. Outside, the storm howled louder. But beneath it, faint distant, the wail of sirens began to rise. Lucas froze, straining to hear. Yes, they were coming. The sound carried over the storm like a thread of hope. Do you hear that? He whispered urgently to Anna. That's help. That's your miracle. Just hold on a little longer. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded, though her grip on his hand tightened until his knuckles ached. Ranger gave a sharp bark, as if echoing the promise. He shoved the wounded intruder to the ground and turned blood staining his fur, but his stance unbroken, his eyes never leaving the doorway. Victor's shadow shifted again. His patience was thinning. He wanted his prize, but the sirens were closer now. The lights not yet visible, but their warning undeniable. Lucas knew they had minutes, maybe less. Lucas, Anna gasped, her voice breaking. I don't want him to see my baby. He won't. Lucas vowed, his jaw set, his voice fierce. I swear it. Over my life, Anna, he won't touch you, or your child. Her body convulsed with another contraction, her cry sharp and guttural. Lucas held her tighter, whispering steady words, anchoring her in the storm. The sirens grew louder, the faint flicker of red and blue beginning to glow through the snow. Victor snarled in frustration, retreating a few steps into the storm. This isn't over, he shouted, his voice echoing into the night. You can't protect her forever? Lucas didn't answer. He didn't waste a breath on threats. His world was here. Anna trembling in his arms, Ranger standing like a sentinel, despite his wound, and the fragile miracle fighting to be born. Push if you have to. Lucas urged, his voice low and steady, his hand brushing the sweat-soaked hair from her face. I've got you. We'll get through this together. Her sob broke raw and desperate, but she nodded. I'm trying. I know, he whispered, his eyes fierce with determination. And you're not alone anymore. The storm raged, the walls groaned, and the sirens wailed closer. The night was a crucible burning away, fear and leaving only grit, only love, only the will to fight for life itself. And in the middle of it all, with death pressing against the cabin walls, the sound of a new life trembled on the edge of arrival. The air in the cabin had turned to steel. Every breath burned cold, every heartbeat pounded like a drum echoing in a hollow chest. Lucas's pistol lay across the room, kicked aside in the last struggle. His chest heaved, muscles taut, sweat mingling with the blood that had trickled from the gash along his arm. Victor Kane stood behind him now, the muzzle of a black steel revolver pressed hard against Lucas's temple. The metal was cold, biting into his skin. On your knees. Victor hissed, his lips close enough that Lucas could feel the venom in his breath. Do it, or I paint these walls with your brains. Lucas's jaw clenched, but he dropped slowly. His eyes locked not on Victor, but on Anna, who was huddled in the corner. She clutched her belly, her face pale, streaked with tears, her body trembling from pain and exhaustion. Don't you touch her! Lucas growled, his voice a low thunder. Victor laughed, short and sharp, the sound slicing through the storm outside. She's not yours to protect, Grant. She never was. She belongs to me. And when I'm finished, the brat she carries won't see daylight. Anna whimpered, shaking her head violently. Please, no. Lucas's eyes burned rage and helplessness colliding. If you want me, take me, he snapped. Leave her out of this. Victor sneered, pressing the barrel harder against Lucas's head. Oh, I'll take you, all right. But I'll take her first. Watching you break while she screams, that's the only satisfaction I need. A low growl rumbled from the shadows. Victor stiffened his eyes, darting toward the sound. Ranger? The shepherd's amber eyes glowed faintly in the dim cabin light. He moved slow, deliberate, his paws silent against the wooden floor. Blood streaked his flank where the shotgun pellets had grazed him earlier. But his head was low, ears, pinned lips, curled back to bare teeth. Lucas's pulse spiked. He didn't dare turn his head, but his voice dropped low, steady. "You hear that, Victor? That's the sound of your last chance to walk away." Victor chuckled darkly. "That dog's bleeding out. He doesn't have a fight left in him." "Try him," Lucas said, his voice steel. Anna's sobs filled the silence. She clutched her belly tighter, a fresh contraction twisting her body. She gasped, her voice breaking. "Lucas." Victor's grin widened. "Hear that she's already breaking? Soon she'll beg me instead of you." Lucas's fingers flexed against the floorboard's nails, digging into the wood. He was waiting, praying for the right second. And then it came. Outside, the sudden blaze of headlights cut through the storm. Twin beams pierced the snow, slicing across the trees and flooding through the broken cabin doorway. Voices shouted sharp and commanding. "Police, drop your weapon." Victor flinched, the light searing his eyes. That was the crack Lucas needed. Now Ranger Lucas roared. The shepherd exploded forward with a snarl that split the night. His body slammed into Victor's side teeth, clamping down hard on the man's wrist. The revolver fired the shot, tearing into the ceiling, as Victor screamed, the gun tumbling from his hand. Lucas spun, lunging at Victor with the force of a battering ram. They crashed against the wall, the revolver clattering uselessly to the floor. Ranger held fast, his jaws locked like iron around Victor's arm, dragging him sideways as he struggled. Victor bellowed, slamming his elbow back into Lucas's ribs. But Lucas gritted through the pain, wrapping an arm around Victor's throat, yanking him backward. The two grappled violently, their bodies crashing against the overturned table, sending splinters flying. "Get off me," Victor howled, his free hand clawing at Lucas's grip. Blood ran down his arm where Ranger's teeth had torn through skin, dripping onto the floorboards. Outside, the shouts grew louder. Boots pounded against snow as officers fanned toward the cabin, their flashlights slashing through the night. Among them was a small figure bundled in a too-large coat, clutching a notebook tight to his chest. "Ben Parker." "Lucas," the boy cried, his voice thin but fierce against the storm. Lucas's chest clenched. "Not here. Not now." "Stay back," he shouted, his voice cracking from the strain. Victor twisted violently, rage twisting his face, spittle flying from his lips. "You think they'll save you? I'll gut you all before they step inside." Ranger growled, his body braced his jaws, tearing deeper until Victor shrieked. The revolver lay only a few feet away, just beyond reach. Victor's eyes darted to it, desperation flashing. He shifted, using all his strength to shove Lucas sideways, scrambling toward the weapon. "No," Lucas bellowed, diving after him. The next moments blurred Ranger, lunging again, Ben shouting from the doorway. Officers aiming their weapons through the broken frame. Victor's fingers brushed the revolver's grip, and Ranger struck. With every ounce of strength left in his battered body, the shepherd clamped his teeth down on Victor's forearm, dragging him backward with a feral snarl. Victor screamed, the gun skidding across the floor. Lucas seized the moment. He slammed Victor's arm against the ground, wrenching it behind his back, his knee driving into the man's spine. "Don't move!" Lucas roared, his voice shaking the air. "It's over, Kane." Victor thrashed, his face twisted in fury, but the fight bled out of him under Lucas's iron grip. Ranger hovered inches from his throat, growls vibrating deep in his chest, ready to tear into him if he so much as twitched. Anna's sobs filled the silence, sharp and ragged, her body curling as another wave of pain tore through her. Lucas's heart split hearing it, but his grip didn't waver. "Cuff him," an officer shouted as they surged through the doorway. Two pairs of hands yanked Victor up, forcing his arms behind him, cold steel snapping shut around his wrists. His curses filled the room, venomous and empty now that the gun was gone and the shepherd's teeth had left their mark. Lucas collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving, every muscle burning. Ranger limped to his side, blood streaking his fur, and pressed his head against Lucas's arm. Lucas's hand found the shepherd's neck, his voice breaking. "Good boy. You did it. You saved us." Ben stood frozen in the doorway, eyes wide, the notebook still clutched against his chest. He stared at Ranger, then at Lucas, then at Anna, pale and trembling in the corner. "She needs help!" Ben shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. "Please!" Lucas turned his gaze, locking on Anna. Her breaths were shallow, her skin pale as snow, her eyes filled with both terror and stubborn determination. She clutched her belly, whispering, "Lucas, please don't leave me." He crawled to her side, taking her hand once more. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the sirens wailed louder, the lights flashing red and blue through the falling snow. Officers swarmed the cabin, their voices a blur. But for Lucas, the world had narrowed to Anna's trembling hand in his and Ranger's steady weight leaning against his shoulder. Victor was dragged, screaming, into the storm, his words swallowed by the wind. "This isn't the end. You'll regret this." Lucas didn't look back. He didn't care. The nightmare was finally breaking. He leaned closer to Anna, his forehead brushing hers. It's over. He's gone. Her tears spilled freely now, but her lips curved into the faintest trembling smile. Then let's bring him into the world, she whispered, her hand guiding his to her belly. Lucas's throat tightened. Outside, the storm raged, but for the first time that night, he believed they might actually make it through. The storm hadn't eased. It howled against the cabin walls, rattling loose boards, shrieking through the cracks, like a living thing that refused to let go. But inside, the world had narrowed to a fragile, desperate moment. Lucas knelt on the floor, cradling Anna against him, as another wave of pain ripped through her body. Her nails dug into his arm, her face contorted, drenched with sweat. He kept his forehead pressed to hers, whispering steady words through gritted teeth. You're almost there, Anna. Just one more. You can do this. You have to do this. Her sob broke into a scream, sharp and raw, echoing through the cabin, louder than the storm outside. She clutched her belly, every muscle in her body trembling, tears streaking her pale cheeks. Lucas, she gasped, shaking. I can't. Yes, you can, he said, fierce and unyielding. I've got you. You're not alone anymore. Behind him, Ranger lay against the wall, his chest rising and falling unevenly. Blood seeped through his fur, staining the floor beneath him. The shepherd's amber eyes blinked slowly, fixed on them, refusing to close even as exhaustion pulled at him. His ears twitched faintly. With every cry, Anna made his loyalty binding him to the moment, as much as any human heart. Lucas's gaze flicked at him, his throat tightening. Hold on, Ranger. Just hold on a little longer. A sharp cry from Anna pulled him back. He looked down just as the fragile miracle broke into the world. The sound came first. A piercing, desperate wail, tiny, unsteady, yet powerful enough to drown out the roar of the storm. Anna collapsed back against Lucas's chest, her face wet with tears. But her lips broke into a trembling smile. Is he? Lucas's hands shook as he wrapped the newborn in his jacket, his own tears blurring the edges of the world. He stared down at the small pink face fists, curled tight, eyes squeezed shut, the tiny chest heaving with breath. Alive. Against all odds, alive. He's perfect, Lucas, whispered, his voice cracking. Anna, he's perfect, Anna sobbed, reaching weakly for her child. Lucas lowered the baby into her trembling arms, helping her cradle him close. She pressed her lips to the infant's damp forehead, whispering a prayer of gratitude through her tears. The tiny boy's cries filled the cabin, fierce and defiant, as if declaring to the storm itself that he had conquered it. Outside, officers spread through the trees, their flashlights sweeping over the snow, their radios crackling. Voices carried through the open doorway, steady and commanding. The world beyond was chaos, but here in the heart of the cabin, something holy had taken root. Ben Parker stood just inside the threshold, his breath coming in white puffs, his notebook clutched to his chest. His wide eyes glistened as he stared not at the baby, but at the shepherd lying motionless on the floor. Lucas? His voice was small, fragile. He's gonna live, right, Ranger? He'll live. Lucas's throat closed. He looked at the dog blood seeping into the white snow that had blown across the floorboards, his chest rising shallower. Now his gaze locked faithfully on the child he'd fought to protect. Lucas placed a trembling hand on Ranger's neck. He's strong, he whispered, forcing the words through the knot in his chest. He's the strongest I've ever known. Ben's lip trembled. He knelt beside Ranger, small fingers brushing the shepherd's ear. Please, don't go. Ranger's tail thumped weakly against the floor, a faint, fragile rhythm. His eyes flicked toward Ben, then back to the newborn in Anna's arms, as if assuring them both. Lucas swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in his eyes. He hears you, Ben. He knows. Anna's weak voice broke through, trembling, but certain. He saved us. Lucas nodded, his hand tightening against Ranger's fur. Yeah, he did. The baby cried again, louder this time, the sound carrying out into the night. The storm seemed to falter for a moment, as if the world itself paused to listen. Outside, the flash of red and blue lights broke through the tree line. An ambulance rolled slowly into view, tires crunching over the thick snow. Officers hurried toward the cabin, their boots pounding the frozen ground. Officer Grant, a voice called. Lucas looked up, his arm still around Anna, his other hand gripping Ranger's fur. In here, he shouted hoarsely. Two paramedics burst through the door, their faces tense but steady. They dropped to their knees beside Anna, their hands already moving, checking vitals, wrapping the infant in a clean blanket. He's breathing strong, one said with a quick nod. Mother's stable, the other confirmed, glancing at Lucas. You did good, sir. You kept her alive. Lucas's chest heaved, a relief flooding him so hard it almost knocked him over. But his eyes drifted back to Ranger. Please, Lucas said, his voice raw. He needs help. He's lost blood. One paramedic glanced at the shepherd, hesitating. We'll do what we can. Lucas's hand didn't leave Ranger's neck. Do everything. He's not just a dog. He's family. Ben looked up at Lucas, tears glistening in his young eyes. Promise he'll be okay. Lucas forced a smile, though his chest ached. We'll fight for him. Same way he fought for us. Anna shifted weakly, the baby nestled against her chest. She looked at Ranger, her lips trembling. Tell him thank you. Lucas leaned down, his lips close to the shepherd's ear. You hear that, boy? She says thank you. And so do I. You saved 3 lives tonight. Don't you dare quit on me now. Ranger's eyes blinked slowly, his tail giving another faint thump. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The storm still raged outside. But within the cabin, the cries of a newborn mingled with the faint thud of a loyal dog's tail. Life had clawed its way through death's shadow, fragile, but fierce, tender, yet unbreakable. And as Lucas looked at Anna, cradling her child at Ben's small hand, resting on Ranger's fur, he felt something stir in his chest. A warmth that had been frozen for far too long. Not just survival, not just duty, but family. The storm had finally broken. Outside the cabin, the snow had settled into soft drifts, the furious winds dying into silence. The kind of silence that didn't feel threatening anymore, but reverent, like the earth itself was exhaling after a long, brutal fight. Victor Kane stumbled through the snow wrists, bound tight in steel. The metal cuffs gleamed under the pale morning sun, cold and unforgiving. His face, bruised and streaked with dirt, twisted with rage. Even in defeat, his eyes burned with venom, drilling into Lucas, into Anna, into the life he had failed to destroy. You think this is over? Victor hissed, his voice raw, low, almost serpentine. The 2 officers dragging him forward didn't flinch, but his gaze lingered on Anna, who clutched her newborn tightly against her chest. You'll never be safe. Not from me. Not from the world I built. Lucas stepped forward, calm but unyielding, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the snow. He met Victor's glare without blinking. You lost Lucas, said, his voice sharp as ice. And you're done hurting people? That world you built, it ends here. Victor's lips curled into a smile, a dark, broken smile. You can't kill a shadow, he sneered before being shoved into the back of the waiting transport vehicle. The door slammed shut with a metallic thud that echoed across the clearing. For a long moment, no one moved. The air carried the faintest trace of gunpowder and blood, a reminder of what had almost been lost. Then slowly the focus shifted. Inside the cabin, Anna cradled the small bundle against her chest, her trembling fingers stroking the infant's downy hair. Her eyes red from tears, and exhaustion softened as she whispered his name for the first time. Noah, she breathed, her lips brushing his forehead. My Noah. My light after the storm. The baby stirred, his tiny mouth parting as he let out a faint cry, not of fear, but of life, raw, insistent, a declaration that he had survived. Anna's tears spilled freely, but this time they carried hope. Lucas stepped back inside quietly, his boots crunching softly on the wooden floor. He stood near the doorway for a moment, watching the scene, his breath catching in his chest. He'd seen hundreds of moments like this before: rescues, reunions, fragile beginnings, but never had one pierced him so deeply. For a fleeting second, he imagined what his life might have been if the past had not taken so much from him. If he had still been a husband, a father. The thought ached, but watching Anna and Noah, it didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a door cracking open. Beside him, a small voice broke through the hush. She's okay now, right? Lucas turned. Ben Parker stood just behind him, his cheeks flushed from the cold, his notebook clutched tight in his arms. His blonde hair stuck up in messy tufts beneath his knit cap, his wide eyes darting between Anna and the tiny bundle she held. Lucas crouched slightly so they were eye level. Yeah, he said softly. She's okay. They both are. Ben's gaze shifted to Ranger, lying on a blanket in the corner, his side bandaged hastily but effectively. The shepherd's breathing was shallow, his ears twitching faintly as a paramedic worked carefully to stabilize him. He's not gonna die, right? Ben whispered, his voice quivering. Lucas placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. He's a fighter, just like you. Ben bit his lip, his eyes glistening. He saved her. He saved the baby. He saved all of us. Lucas's throat tightened, and he nodded slowly. Yeah, he did. The paramedic glanced up. We've stopped the bleeding. He needs a real clinic, but he's holding on. Ben crouched beside Ranger, brushing his fingers gently over the shepherd's paw. You can't leave us now, he whispered. Ranger's tail gave the faintest thump against the floor, his amber eyes flicking open just long enough to meet Ben's. The boy's face lit with a small trembling smile relief flooding through him. Lucas looked at Ben at the way the boy's small frame seemed to carry a weight far heavier than his years. He'd seen that look before in kids who'd lost too much too young, Ben Lucas said softly. The boy looked up, blinking. Lucas extended his hand, not as an officer, not as a rescuer, but as something deeper. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Ben's lip trembled. He looked at Lucas's hand, then at Anna, then back at Ranger. Slowly, cautiously, he reached out his small fingers, slipping into Lucas's strong grasp. Does that mean? Lucas squeezed his hand gently. It means you're not alone. Not now. Not ever again. Ben's eyes filled with tears, but this time he didn't look away. He clung to Lucas's hand like it was the anchor he'd been searching for his entire life. Anna watched from the cot, her face weary but glowing. She held Noah closer, her heart swelling as she whispered to him. You see that, baby? That's what family looks like. The first rays of dawn spilled through the cracks in the cabin's wooden walls, painting the room in pale gold. Snowflakes glittered in the air like tiny shards of light drifting gently through the broken doorway. The world outside was still battered, scarred by the storm. But in here, amidst the wreckage and the wounds, something new had been born, not just a child, but a family stitched together by courage, sacrifice, and the quiet, relentless choice to stay. Noah whimpered softly, and Anna rocked him gently, her lips brushing his forehead once more. You're safe now, she whispered. Lucas glanced at Ranger, then back at Ben, his chest tightening with something fierce, protective, and unyielding. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be scars, emotional, physical, invisible, but for the first time in years, he believed in the possibility of healing. He looked out the cabin window as the sun rose higher, glinting off the snow. For the first time since the storm began, the light felt warm. A new dawn had come to Pine Hollow. And for Lucas, Anna, Ben, Ranger, and the tiny miracle named Noah, it was only the beginning. The storm had become only a memory. Pine Hollow, scarred but standing, woke beneath a sky scrubbed clean by the night. The air was sharp with cold, yet the streets no longer whispered of danger. Instead, they carried the hum of life-returning doors, creaked open. Chimneys exhaled smoke, and neighbors stepped into the pale light, as though emerging from a long, collective dream. At the heart of the town square, a small crowd had gathered, breath-misting in the morning chill. The snowplows had carved paths through the drifts, but the snow still lay thick along the edges, glistening like glass under the rising sun. In the center, a modest wooden pedestal stood draped with cloth. Children pressed close, their mittened hands tugging at their parents' coats. The baker brought warm rolls in a basket. The postmaster clutched a thermos of steaming coffee, handing cups to those who waited. The storm had taken much, but Pine Hollow had chosen to give back. When the mayor stepped forward, the crowd hushed. He was not a grand man, short with thinning hair and a coat patched twice at the elbows, but his voice carried steady. Sometimes he began his words hanging in the frosty air. It takes the darkest storm to remind us what light really means. This town was built on hard winters and harder battles, but never have I seen such courage as I did 2 nights ago. He pulled the cloth away, revealing the statue beneath. It was simple, carved from local cedar and set upon a stone base. A German shepherd ears pricked gaze-forward posture, both fierce and gentle. At his paws, etched into the wood, was a small shield with one word: loyalty. Gasps spread through the crowd, followed by a ripple of applause. Ranger lay nearby, still healing his side bandaged beneath a woolen blanket. He lifted his head at the sound, amber eyes bright. His tail thumped once, then again, slow but strong. Children crowded closer, whispering his name. Lucas stood with Anna at his side. Noah cradled in her arms. The baby stirred against her chest, a tiny fist peeking from the swaddle. Beside them, Ben clutched his sketchbook cheeks pink from the cold, his eyes locked on the statue. The mayor's voice softened. This isn't just for a dog. It's for the bravery he represents, for the people who refuse to give up, for the family born not of blood, but of choice. Anna's eyes glistened. She shifted Noah gently, her voice barely a whisper. He'll grow up knowing this story, knowing he was born into hope. Lucas glanced at her, then at Ben, who was sketching the statue with quick, precise strokes. He rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. Ben looked up at him, his smile small but sure. When the ceremony ended, the townspeople didn't scatter. They lingered, sharing food, laughter, memories of the storm. Someone pressed a loaf of bread into Anna's hands. Another left a knitted blanket for Noah. Pine Hollow, in its quiet, stubborn way, was knitting itself back together. Later, Lucas led them down a narrow lane past houses with fresh boards nailed across broken shutters until they reached a small cottage on the edge of town. The paint was chipped, the porch sagged slightly, but the windows shone with new glass. A hand-painted sign on the gate read, "Welcome home." Anna gasped softly. "Is this?" Lucas nodded. The town pitched in. They wanted you and Noah to have a place to start fresh. And Ben, too. Ben's eyes widened. For us, Lucas said quietly. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and fresh paint. A modest living room opened to a small kitchen. In the corner, a wooden cradle sat by the window, draped in a handmade quilt stitched with tiny stars. Ranger padded slowly inside his paws, careful against the rug, and settled beside the cradle, as though he had always belonged there. Anna laid Noah gently inside. The baby stirred lips parting in a faint sigh, then drifted back into sleep. Ranger lowered his head, nose brushing the edge of the cradle, a low rumble of contentment in his chest. Ben touched the quilt, his voice hushed. "It's like a dream." Lucas crouched beside him. "Dreams can be real, Ben, especially when we fight for them." The boy hesitated, then whispered, "I don't remember the last time I felt safe." Lucas placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "You are now. You'll never have to wonder again." For a moment, silence filled the cottage. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of peace, soft, steady whole. Anna sank onto the sofa, exhaustion and relief etched in every line of her face. She looked at Lucas, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to thank you." "No, how to—" "You don't have to," he replied. "We all got each other through." She held his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Not romance, not yet, but trust. The kind of trust that could one day grow into something stronger. Noah whimpered, and Ranger lifted his head immediately, ears twitching. Anna smiled faintly. "He's already got a guardian." Lucas nodded. 2 of them. Outside, the bells from the church tower rang noon, their chimes carrying over the rooftops. Children laughed in the distance. Life, fragile but fierce, had returned. Ben flipped open his notebook again, sketching the cradle Ranger beside it, and Anna smiling down at her son. He scribbled words under the picture in careful block letters, family. When Lucas leaned over to see the boy, glanced up nervously. "Is it okay?" Lucas smiled, his chest tightening. "It's perfect." As the sun climbed higher, its light spilled through the window, warming the room. The storm was over, the wound still raw, but healing had begun. And in Pine Hollow, a town that had faced the worst of nights, a new kind of family had taken root. A family forged not by blood, but by the storm they survived. A voiceover, soft yet resolute, carried through the final scenes. Sometimes family isn't the one we're born into. It's the one we fight for. The one we protect. The one we choose. And sometimes family looks like a brave woman, a newborn child, a boy who wouldn't give up, a man who refused to walk away, and a dog whose loyalty lit the path through the storm. Together they showed us what it means to face the darkness and find the dawn. The camera lingered on Ranger, his head resting beside the cradle, amber eyes watching over Noah as he slept. Anna reached out her hand, brushing Ben's, while Lucas stood behind them, steady and unyielding. The screen faded slowly. The last image, a simple truth etched in silence. "Safe now."